Hello, everybody. Welcome to this show for wicketsandruns.net. With me is Shah Faisal from Atlanta. And today we'll be looking ahead to Pakistan's visit in New Zealand and other cricketing matters. For those of you who don't know, Shah is a former first-class player. He's played 5 List A matches, 2 first-class matches. He's also represented Rawalpindi in under-19 competitions back in the late 90s. And he's played several years of league cricket in England, in Essex, and nowadays he's involved in radio commentary for Radio Pakistan, and he also called the opening round of the Quaid E Azam Trophy this year between Central Punjab and Sindh in Karachi. He's also a level 2 coach from ECB, and he's got over 2,000 Twitter followers. So welcome, Shah. Welcome, Faisal.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. I hope you're having a good day, and thanks for the nice intro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll talk about, firstly, New Zealand versus Pakistan. Tomorrow, there's a test match between New Zealand and West Indies at Basin Reserve. And if you look at that ground's history, Pakistan have never lost a test match at that ground. They've played there 8 times, won 3, drawn 5. Do you think it's a tactical decision from New Zealand not to host Pakistan at that venue?
Yeah, Basin Reserve is traditionally a very slow kind of pitch, very unlike the other New Zealand pitches, which are very seamer friendly. But Basin Reserve is that one pitch where it has a slight nature, which is pretty similar to the subcontinent, not exactly the same, but Pakistan have enjoyed their fair share of success at Basin Reserve. And I don't know if it's tactical or not, but home teams, especially countries who plan their tours strategically, like New Zealand are or Australia are, I'm sure somewhere along the lines they have this thinking in their mind to make it as tough for the visitors as they can. And if it may be by choosing a venue where they feel at home, not to give them that opportunity to play on that venue. It could well be, I'm not sure, but as a home team, they have every right to do that. So I would have no problem with that.
And it's quite a windy ground. It's got a reputation for being quite a windy ground, and it's the premier test venue in New Zealand as well. In terms of, it's the Lords of New Zealand as far as test venues in the country go. So, well, disappointing not to see Pakistan play there.
Yeah, as far as windy grounds go, I think the old stadium at the Dunedin, the Carisbrook, used to be also called a very windy ground. And mostly the grounds in New Zealand, other than the very few, like which are proper built stadiums, they're open grounds. And when they have they don't have the stands all around it, then it can be very windy in New Zealand. And listening to a few former Pakistan cricketers, they say that the wind they experience in New Zealand, they haven't experienced it in anywhere other part of the cricketing world. So wind is a factor, but in slightly more open grounds. But the traditional stadiums, the likes of the Eden Park and the newly built stadium as well, they're not as open as it used to be in New Zealand. So, but again, I mean, home ground, home advantage. And if you notice lately, cricket is being played where the home teams normally dominate against the visiting teams. It's a general thing. It's not specific to any country. And New Zealand, if they want to play by their strengths, I mean, fair play to them.
And you mentioned Eden Park there. That's where the tour gets underway next Friday with the first of 3 T20 internationals. And it's such a small ground, we can expect so many sixes in that game.
Yeah, we do. And we used to get quite a few sixes even before this modern day era of big bats and T20 cricket. Eden Park used to be the high scoring ground in white ball cricket, especially one day cricket back in the day. But yeah, you're right. But, we have to mention Pakistan's preparations hasn't been ideal. They have to go through a very strict quarantine. And now that they're out and about and training, but they're quite a few days behind schedule as they were according to the original plans that were there. So you have to keep that in mind. And New Zealand being a very good white ball team playing at home, Pakistan's team task will be cut out because I mean, as I said, the preparation hasn't been there. They're playing at Queenstown at the moment. It's another very open ground with the airplanes flying left, right, and center. So, I mean, coming to Eden Park, such a small venue, and they'll be in the heat of the battle right from the word go. And they would have to just go back to their basic instincts and fight hard. But as I say, the preparation hasn't been ideal for that.
Now, you mentioned preparation there. Perhaps preparation has been ideal from this point of view, is that in quarantine, they would have watched the whole of the first New Zealand versus West Indies test match. There's no excuse not to watch that test match. They couldn't do anything else. They would have studied the players closely.
Do you think so?
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. But, you know, in quarantine, what I heard from inside sources and being involved recently with the media and being quite close to the players who are there right now lately, got some really disturbing news for how tough it was on the players, where, I mean, they're not used to that. And they would serve breakfast at a particular time in the morning, and that would be laid outside their doors. And if they're not up by that time, that breakfast will be cold. They still have to eat. And then right after that, their lunch would be at 12:30. And that would be delivered outside their door. Even if you're not hungry, it doesn't matter. You have to have your lunch at 12:30. And if you don't have it by that time, it won't be edible, so to speak. So the cricketers, you know, that they're like celebrities here in Pakistan, especially in subcontinent. They're treated as celebrities. So that side of life they wouldn't have experienced. So that has put them through quite a tough experience. If you look at it, like you said, on a positive side, they might have studied New Zealand, and also that might have toughened their resolve mentally, because a lot of times people take a lot of things for granted. And sometimes when you see that side of life, you know, it makes you take a deep look into everything in perspective. And in that sense, that might have helped them. But only time will tell if when they take to the field at Eden Park next week to see that how ready they would be or how undercooked they will be.
And sticking with Eden Park, Pakistan have enjoyed a lot of success there in recent times. They won a T20 there in 2018. They won a T20 there in 2016. And in the 2015 World Cup, they beat South Africa at the venue Eden Park. How much confidence will that give the team that they're starting on a ground where they've enjoyed a lot of success in recent visits to New Zealand?
It does. History does matter. I mean, it does have a feel-good factor about a certain venue when you go. If you've performed there as an individual or as a team, and of all those victories, the most iconic one you remember would be the World Cup semi-final, which a lot of players growing up would have seen and they would have looked up to it, especially the ones who were going for the first time. So it will have a full feel-good factor. But as I said, when you take to the field on that first day or first afternoon of the tour, everything will be put behind and you will be as good as you play on that given day. And for that, I mean, they would have to be really on the ball. I mean, the good thing is that Pakistani players, they have played a lot of T20 cricket this year. You remember, he played the domestic T20 competition. All the top players featured in that. That was a very hard-fought contest as well. So the preparation must have been good. It's just that they had that little break since they've been in New Zealand. They haven't played any cricket before that. They were playing consistently. I mean, Zimbabwe toured. There was another T20 and ODI cricket. Because all the players who were there, they were playing first-class cricket as well, apart from the ones who were playing against Zimbabwe. So they were pretty tuned up going into that tour. It's just that they're a week behind in their schedule in New Zealand. So in bigger scheme of things, it should not affect them that drastically. But that first game would really set the tone for the tour.
Now, it's been sad times in the cricket world with lots of players losing their fathers. Kemar Roach lost his father recently. Ben Stokes lost his father recently. And today, I heard during Shan Masood's presser, he was speaking to the Pakistan media earlier today. And I heard that Faisal Shah, he lost his father. And because they were in quarantine, no, they couldn't console him in the way they would have liked. And that was really tough. So.
Absolutely right. And that's we heard the news when it came through that Khushdil's father had passed away. only a couple of days after they had left on the tour, and because of the strict quarantine, like you said, nobody was able to go and console with him in person, and that must have been really tough on him. And you mentioned Ben Stokes and Kemar Roach as well. I mean, especially Ben, having studied a lot about his relationship with his dad. It's very well documented. So that must have been very tough on him. And he was sick for quite a while, and Ben had to quit some cricket to go and attend to him as well. But like I was just reading one of his tweets, and he was really taken aback by his dad's demise because he had a huge role in his cricketing career as well. So very tough times, yeah, definitely. But I mean, with Khushdil's loss, the way it was and the way they were stuck in quarantine, it must have been the toughest of them all to take.
Now, historically, New Zealand have been the whipping boys for Pakistan in international cricket. Pakistan have got a very dominant record against New Zealand historically, very impressive record. But that's not the case in recent times. In, say, the last decade, Pakistan haven't beaten New Zealand in a test series since 2011, and they haven't beaten them in an ODI series since the same year. Like in the last 3 test series New Zealand and Pakistan have played, New Zealand have won 2 and drawn 1. And last time they met in a 5-match ODI series in New Zealand won 5-0. And that was at the start of 2018. So I think the previous 5 times they've met in ODIs, Pakistan haven't won the series. So recent times, New Zealand have had the upper hand against Pakistan, but historically, Pakistan have enjoyed playing against New Zealand and enjoyed a lot of success against New Zealand.
Yeah, Pakistan had, and especially when it came to knockout competitions and especially the semi-finals later end of the tournaments, Pakistan came up against New Zealand, and more often than not, Pakistan were able to knock them out. But if you check the last decade, the curves for the both teams have gone in opposite direction. Pakistan has come down slightly, and New Zealand have enjoyed the best, I think the best era of their time, the Brendan McCullum era, and then followed by the Kane Williamson era, which is still going. They reached the World Cup finals in England, and they almost won it, you know. So, and they're very competitive at test level. Remember the last test series even against Pakistan at home. When Pakistan were playing at home in UAE, they were able to win 2 test matches, won the series by 2-1. So that was quite a comprehensive win. And that is a testament to where these two teams stand at the moment as well. Because New Zealand, despite the resources they have, they make the best possible use of it. If you just look at their pace bowling lineup in the last 4 or 5 years, you know, they got consistently producing the bowlers with speeds of 145, 150. And even now they have quite a few spinners have been good, and the batsmen, especially in the leadership of Brendan McCullum, they've completely changed the brand of cricket that New Zealand were associated with. So that positive intent and positive attitude has filtered through all the way down. And now you see the supply of players coming into the national team. They're fearless as well in their approach, and they play the same brand of cricket, which means that they're more consistent than before. And they're, like you said, they're performing better against the ones that traditionally were very strong against them. So that's a testament to the structure and system that New Zealand have in place, where despite being such a small population, they make full use of whatever talent they get, and the talent development programs are good because when you watch it, their under 19 levels, they haven't been very extraordinary performances in the under 19 World Cups from New Zealand. But whatever talent they get, the system they put it in, and when they come out of that system, they're very well developed and groomed and ready to replace their star players who when they leave, they have ready-made replacements. That means a consistent era of success for New Zealand in the last decade and taking into the new decade now.
Now, this is the first tour for Babar Azam as Pakistan's captain in a full-time capacity across formats. What are his strengths and weaknesses as captain? I'll outline a few that I've noticed. Firstly is that he's the outstanding batsman in the team. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And he has had captaincy experience, under 15, under 19, Pakistan A. So he's not been thrown into the deep end without any captaincy experience. They're the positives, I think. And so far, from what we've seen in T20s and ODIs, uh, captaincy hasn't affected his own game in a negative way. He's still been able to perform and score runs and be productive at the top of the order. But what about the downsides and so far?
No downsides as such, but when you analyze closely his captaincy, the things that you mentioned, the most important thing is he's the best batsman in the side, and his own performances have been good. So that's a positive sign. The other sign is that he's very intelligent as a batsman as well. You realize that he's quite intelligent, and he's assesses the situations very good. He's very hardworking, and that means that he doesn't compromise on the standards that he set for himself, which will keep him in good stead when expecting what to expect from his other teammates. The only thing is that we watched him very closely during the national T20 and the series against Zimbabwe as well, the home series in ODIs and T20 cricket, is that tactically he's not there as yet, which is understandable. But, he had a lot of help from Rizwan in that ODI series against Zimbabwe, because the first game, if you remember the 50-over game, Zimbabwe were well in control, and at one stage they were cruising. And when he brought back Shaheen Afridi, his crunch bowler, and he went for a couple of boundaries, at that moment, looking from the stands or from the commentary box, it seemed that Babar had lost it a little bit. He didn't have a clue what to do. And at that time, Rizwan went to him, who also has a lot of captaincy experience. His team, KPK, won the national T20 just a few weeks before that. And he was also captain the Pakistan A side against England Lions and New Zealand A. So he went along, and at that time, it seemed that he needed that help from Rizwan, which he got. And together, they rescued that situation. And that's one thing that Babar will have to get hold of, because in this, especially in white ball cricket, you could be put under immense pressure. There's some big players in white ball cricket who can take apart the game in 1 or 2 overs. You could have complete control of the game up until that point. But 1, 2, or 3 big overs can change the entire situation. And at that moment, if you just think on your feet and just be stable enough, you can assess the situations under pressure. Then he would take that next grade and become a long-term captain. But he's very young, and as I said, he's very intelligent. So if he keeps learning from his mistakes and the situations that he goes through, I think Pakistan would have a long-term captain, and I have no doubt about that. But he needs time. I mean, you cannot jump to conclusions after 1 or 2 series. You have to give him time, because when you make such a young captain, you have to give him time. You took a chance, so it can't be for 1 or 2 series. So it has to have an extended run, and you have to bear with him regardless of whatever the results come.
It's an interesting time to promote him to a test captaincy after losing an ODI to Zimbabwe on home soil. But sticking with Babar Azam, he hasn't experienced much success as captain at the domestic level. You mentioned national T20, Central Punjab were unable to make it through to the semi-finals, not just this year, but the previous year as well, when he was leading them. And he could really benefit from leading a PSL franchise and learning captaincy at that level. The pressure, the expectation that comes with leading a franchise, that will put him in good stead. It seems odd that he's not leading a franchise in the Pakistan Super League.
I mean, in an ideal world, yes. But talking about his captaincy in the national T20, remember he missed the first leg. So his team was languishing at the bottom of the table when he joined halfway through the tournament. So, but there was a very clear difference in his side when he took over. Not just because of his batting, but his captaincy. So there were signs that he is growing into the role. So we cannot judge too much on that domestic performance, because he missed half the tournament, at least this year. But talking about him leading the franchise, he's playing for Karachi Kings, and Karachi Kings are the champion under Imad Wasim. So I don't see it happening over there unless he moves a drastic transfer and goes to his hometown team, Lahore Qalandars, who didn't have a captain who has played international cricket, that is Sohail Akhtar. And although they reached the final, there was always question marks about him being as a captain. That could be a very interesting move because this year in the final, it was very interesting. A Lahori boy helped Karachi to win against Lahore. So if anybody's thinking, I mean, for a dramatic transfer of him to Lahore Qalandars, that could really make it more interesting in more ways than one.
Now, you mentioned the PSL there. Today, the Big Bash has started in Australia, the next edition of the Big Bash. And we've seen a couple of players like Tom Curran and Tom Banton pull out of representing their Big Bash franchises because of the fed up of bubbles. They've had enough of bubble life. Do you fear similar things might happen in the PSL coming up if it is going to be with bubbles, that perhaps we might not see the international stars? We might see a few of them pull out because it's going to be a long month if they have to live in bubbles in Pakistan.
First of all, I wouldn't blame these players because having recently been pretty close to have seen players in the bubble, and it's very difficult on them. And then to keep performing day in and day out. I mean, first of all the sympathies should be with the players and all the gratitude for them to still show up and give us the amount of entertainment in this difficult period, starting from the English summer all the way up to now. Although now that the New Zealand quarantine is different and players are out of bubble once they do the quarantine. And hopefully with all this news of vaccine, I know you're in UK, you've already started the vaccination process. So hopefully the PSL franchises or all the other big leagues in the next few months, they would be able to immunize all the players and they don't have to be part of that bubble with that vaccine. And it's still like what, three months, almost 3 months away, the PSL. So, or two months or about 10 weeks away. So we hope that by then things would have moved quicker and players won't have to be in that bubble any longer, even if it has to be an initial quarantine of a week or 10 days. But after that, I mean, you can't expect players to be in that mode forever and still be performing because it's not very easy. But we hope that things will move in the right direction, and with all this vaccination happening around the world, the franchises or the ICC could take a leap forward and get all the players vaccinated who are involved playing, so at least they can enjoy their freedom.
And before the PSL, we have South Africa touring Pakistan for 2 Test Championship fixtures. Pakistan haven't won a Test series against South Africa since 2003. South Africa have a very dominant record against Pakistan in head-to-head contests when it comes to Test cricket. So that's an opportunity for Pakistan to turn around that record and win a series against South Africa after 18 years in Test cricket when they return from New Zealand.
Yeah, that series is the only series win by Pakistan against South Africa that you mentioned. And again, like in 90s, Pakistan were very dominant at home, but they lost 1-0 in 97. That was the series that they should have won, chasing a very modest target in the 4th innings in Faisalabad, around 140, I think. But coming back to this series, it's very interesting that both the teams are languishing at 6th and 7th in the current ICC ranking. So South Africa is going through a difficult time. Pakistan
one thing I'll say here is I don't give much value to the rankings anymore with the introduction of the World Test Championship. I think that takes precedence and the rankings takes a backseat now.
It does, but it still in a way is not far off the mark when you see the current situation on ground of these two teams or their recent performances. And like I said, South Africa are going through a difficult phase in their cricket. They used to be like one of the top 3 teams at all times in the 90s and early 2000s. But like you said, it's a golden opportunity. Pakistan playing at home would have a good chance of getting the series win under their belt. The test matches are at Karachi and Rawalpindi. It's going to be terribly cold in Rawalpindi. I know that first week of February is normally cold, and See, if the wicket, Rawalpindi pitch has been very good lately with even bounce and carry and good movement with the new ball. So that'll be a tricky situation for Coach Misbah to decide what type of wickets he want to play South Africa, because we all know Pakistan's batting lineup is vulnerability against moving ball and on the bouncier pitches. Even the tall quicks of Zimbabwe found the Rawalpindi pitch to their liking, and after that one defeat, all of a sudden in the next game, the wicket was prepared in a way that it wasn't bouncing as much and it was a bit slower and drier compared to whatever we'd seen all season on that pitch. So that'll be a tricky decision for Pakistan. Remember playing at home after a long time. I know we had a season last year with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, but with all due respect, South Africa still is a totally different proposition to those two teams. So it'll be intriguing to see what type of wickets Pakistan decide to play, what combinations, according to that, Pakistan will play, because there's not a lot of depth in Pakistan's spin bowling attack, although in the current domestic season, the spinners are dominating. But in the national squad, they haven't had a run at all in the last few years. Just Yasir Shah is the only regular spinner. So there's no off spinner in Pakistan national team that has played lately with some consistency. Neither the left arm spinner like Zulfikar Babar was a few years ago.
How about Noman Ali? Give him a go against South Africa. He's taking a heap of wickets.
I know he has at domestic level, but at international level, he hasn't been tried and trusted. Last year, you remember the Rawalpindi test against Sri Lanka, which got rained off. Pakistan went without a spinner. So that means that at the forefront of Misbah's thoughts, there was only one spinning option, and he's done that. Bilal Asif, who's got few fifers at international level, hasn't featured much in domestic cricket. There's Noman Ali, you mentioned, he's already got to 50 wickets in this current season, and he took 54 wickets last year. There's an off spinner called Sajid Khan, who's in the wickets. There's another leg spinner, Zaid Mahmood, who's in the wickets as well. And that's very interesting choices that Misbah would have to make, who he wants to go with. Loaded with fast bowling resources, of course, Pakistan are. So spinning options will be key for Coach Misbah, but they get paid the huge bucks to make these difficult decisions. So he has a few on his hand. But at the moment, I think his thoughts would be no further than this New Zealand series.
Now, we talked about a spin option there, and we're looking ahead to the New Zealand series, and particularly the test matches, which start on Boxing Day. It's 3 test matches due to be played on Boxing Day, in fact. Australia, India, and South Africa, Sri Lanka as well. Do you think Yasir Shah will be in the playing 11 in New Zealand conditions? We've seen New Zealand in their test match against West Indies go in with 4 quicks plus the medium pace of Daryl Mitchell. And Pakistan are playing at Mount Maunganui. It's only hosted a single test match previously, where England played against New Zealand, and New Zealand won by an innings. Do you think we can expect to see Yasir Shah on the bench?
I don't think traditionally Pakistan, even on away tours, they don't go without a spinner. As I mentioned, this test match against Sri Lanka at home, they did go, and he came for huge criticism, and eventually it got rained off. So a lot of experts were thinking his blushes were saved by the rain because it was a tactical blunder, and Misbah wouldn't do it again, I think.
Yep. He mentioned that in that Rawalpindi test match, the rain was one of the factors that they didn't play a spinner. They knew it was going to be a short test match, and they just had to bowl out Sri Lanka very cheaply.
Yeah, sometimes after the event, it is very convenient to say what we want to say. But whilst that game was on, it really felt that they had misjudged the pitch, because it was seemingly green, but it had very little for the seamers, and they had to struggle to bowl Sri Lanka out on that first day. And it was evident that the sameness of the attack would have been exposed if that game had carried on into day 2, 3, and 4, which it didn't. And Pakistan only got a hit on the last day of the game. So, yeah, but that's gone, though. And again, in my opinion, if you're asking my opinion, I think Pakistan will go with Yasir Shah.
At least for the first test.
At least for the first test. See how his rhythm is. He can only be dropped on his form, I think. not because of whatever conditions are there, Pakistan will go with one spinner.
Now, it's going to be very different to see a Pakistan team without Asad Shafiq. He's been such a regular presence in the Pakistan Test team. It's going to be odd not seeing him around, but it's good to see Haris Sohail back, who was missing during the Tour of England earlier this year. And he's got a very impressive record against New Zealand. When they played that ODI series, they lost 5-0. He was one of the better batsmen in that series. He's got a Test 100 against New Zealand in the Emirates, and we saw in the 2019 World Cup him playing a valuable innings against New Zealand in partnership with Border-Gavaskar. So he's got a lot of success and a lot of good memories against New Zealand, and he will surely boost the Pakistan's batting lineup in the Test matches. And not just his batting, but his slip catching, and also he offers some useful left arm spin.
I'm not quite sure about when you say he has happy memories of New Zealand, because remember he had that affair with the ghost before the World Cup in New Zealand.
And that was in Christchurch.
On the playing field, yes. And sometimes it surprises me, Haris Sohail, with the talent and the caliber of his stroke play and his entire batting technique and everything, it surprises me that he hasn't gone on to another level in his career. Well, it is surprising in one way and not in another, because he seems such a laid-back character, and sometimes probably he doesn't realize how gifted and how talented he is. And considering that he hasn't converted enough of that into good performances that he's capable of, so will it be a turn up in his career? I hope so, because Pakistan could do him with a left-handed middle order batsman.
I think his strongest format is probably ODIs at the moment, and he's been slightly a victim that Pakistan haven't played much ODI cricket since the World Cup. They've only played a handful of games against Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe. That's why perhaps he hasn't kicked on. World Cup perhaps was the moment that he would have kicked on. But Pakistan haven't played much ODIs since that tournament.
To a certain extent, I agree with you, but I think he can be a very good Test player as well in the middle order. I mean, he's got all the attributes. It's just probably a lack of discipline or a lack of desire or lack of that toughness in character. That's lacking.
But if you recall that Test 100 he got against New Zealand, he batted for over 400 balls, and he batted with a lot of patience and discipline and guts and sensibility. So
my point is that he hasn't done it consistently enough to take him to the next level. Because he, like you mentioned, he has it in him. So if he can do it once, why can't he do it time and again? That's my point.
That's interesting. And do you suspect he'll be in the playing 11?
I think Fawad is in the mix as well. So once again, they will see what combination they would go with. But I think they should play Rizwan at number 7. If he plays at number 6, I think that's one position too high for him, despite his recent success. Because in New Zealand, Pakistan are well capable of getting the 20 wickets. It's just that they need runs on the board. And a longer batting lineup would mean that Haris and Fawad both will play.
Now, one concerning stat about Pakistan's bowling is since November 2019, they've conceded 580 in a Test match innings on 3 occasions. They've had some long days in the field, the bowlers and the fielders.
Well, one way of looking at it is a young pace bowling attack, and they should have learned from it very quickly in their careers, because if they want long careers in Test cricket, they don't want such long days. So they've seen the worst of it. So it's up to them to put it right. And on a serious note, though, very young bowling lineup against very tough opposition in their home backyard. So that did make things easy. And traditionally, the weak fielding of Pakistan, allowing a couple of batsmen, a couple of chances here and there, that also hasn't helped. But like I said, they would have had this experience, and they're well capable of learning from it. And in terms of skill, they're well capable of not allowing it to happen to them consistently, having learned from their mistakes so early in their careers. So, traditionally, despite these stats, as a fan, we never get worried about Pakistan's bowling lineup, although the stats you mentioned are worrying. But for some reason, we have that confidence in our bowling lineup, at least. that they will get 20 wickets when the batsmen put runs on the board. And partly
Yes.
it has been because batsmen haven't got runs, so the bowlers have to toil hard, and it has made matters worse for them. Because if opposition doesn't have a scoreboard pressure, it makes their job easier too. So that makes the bowling suffer.
Yes, although the scores I've mentioned have been when they've been fielding first, like they were on the receiving end of that Zach Crawley 270 odd, and David Warner's 300. They were they were in the first innings of the game. But looking ahead to the series again, let's go for some predictions for the T20 series and then the Test series. Please tell me your predictions in terms of the series scoreline.
Well, I'm not very good at predictions, I have to tell you that. Because, first of all, T20 games, the games can just turn on their head in 1 or 2 overs. So on paper, there's no team strong or weak. It's on the day, on the given situation. Whoever plays best will win.
I'm still going to push you for a scoreline.
I'll turn on my fan hat right now and see what, as a fan, I would like, and I'll be happy if Pakistan win it. So let's say it's my wish. Let's say, put it that way, 2-1 in T20 for Pakistan.
And for the real cricket?
And for the real cricket, I think New Zealand are favorites. 1-0 or 2-0 to New Zealand.
I'm going 2-1 New Zealand in the T20s and 1-0 New Zealand in the Test matches.
Well, at least we're on the same page somewhere along the line.
And across the Tasman in Australia are hosting India in 4 Test matches starting a week today. Let's get straight to the point. Your prediction for the series?
I don't like the way Australians have tamed themselves against India for some reason because of the IPL contract. They don't go as hard on the Indians as they do with other teams. And it does affect subcontinental teams, I have to tell you that. But overall, I see Australia as favorite. I can't come up with a scoreline for that, but I think Australia will take the series.
Okay. No, you're not settling for a scoreline?
No, you go ahead. You do that.
No, I'll stick with you. I think Australia will win the series and they'll do it without losing a Test match.
Okay. Well, 2-0, 3-0. Something along that line. How would that affect you? I know you've been working on the Test Championship tables.
Yeah.
What scoreline is best for Pakistan in both series?
Pakistan need to win 2-0. Simple.
Okay.
A draw puts them out.
Okay.
So I hope that the management is aware of this. If they need to chase 250 in the last innings in 2 sessions, they go for the runs. The draw will be of no use to them.
Okay. That's absolutely spot on.
And as far as India-Australia is concerned, realistically, they need India to be whitewashed 4-0 for Pakistan and Pakistan to win 2-0. And then the table will become a lot more interesting.
Okay.
But one thing I want to mention here is that India and Australia will be playing a day-night Test match, and India have very limited experience of day-night pink ball Test cricket compared to Australia. Historically, India perhaps enjoy playing at the Adelaide Oval, but that might be negated this time with it being a pink ball affair.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, pink ball affairs in the evening, it hoops around, and that takes out the wicket out of the equation, which is normally well suited to the subcontinent players. But intriguing. Just happy and delighted to be seeing so much cricket in such difficult times. So that's one aspect of things that we should never ignore, and we have to thank all the relevant boards and the players for keeping us entertained.
And just a word before we finish on the Sri Lankan Premier League. It's quite a remarkable achievement to start a league during these difficult COVID times with no crowd in the ground, but they've pulled it off.
Yeah, always good to get the first one away, because then you're off and running. And like you said, in such difficult times, it's a huge compliment again to them and to all the players who I know some of the players went straight from the Quaid E Azam Trophy to the Lankan Premier League, and the quarantine was tough over there as well in Sri Lanka. So they got through that, and the event itself has been pretty entertaining and good for Sri Lankan cricket, because in this region, Sri Lanka is a very important member. And to get their own franchise league, I know they had a stop-start previously, and players had issues with their money and stuff. But they've come up with this new tournament, and I wish them all the success. And it was pretty good, considering the difficult times and the way they pulled it off. Really, really good to see.
And one thing I wanted to mention here is that it's interesting to see Mickey Arthur, the coach of the Sri Lankan national team, isn't coaching any of the 5 franchises. There's no conflict of interest there, like there was in PSL.
Yeah, I know, and it's going to surface again. But I think there is some talk of taking this issue head on, and before the next PSL is around, to sort it out that no Pakistan players or officials are involved with the franchises. But Mickey was in the commentary box as well, so from time to time he did come on. Even that in Pakistan has been criticized for people who are working with the national team to be on the commentary panel, and that's also called as conflict of interest. But knowing Mickey, I mean, he's very wholehearted individual, and he's got his heart set on for Sri Lankan cricket like he had for Pakistan cricket. And it's always good to hear him. His insight are very good. But with Sri Lankan Premier League, I think he opted the right choice and not to be involved with the teams.
Or perhaps the board didn't allow him.
I didn't hear any such news that it was from board or for himself, or he wasn't even offered any job. So I'm not quite sure on that how it worked out. But yeah, I mean, if it would have been another huge talking point, and we've seen enough of these talking points here in Pakistan lately, so we could have related to that, but not to be.
And also, one thing I wanted to mention here is that you mentioned the Test Championship there a little while ago. We're seeing lots of Pakistan tours now where it's just tests and T20s. Like when they went to Australia, it was just tests and T20s. When they went to England, just tests and T20s. They're going to New Zealand, just tests and T20s. South Africa coming again, just tests and T20s. It appears that they're just tagging on T20s to Test Championship series. And because of ODI League now, it's rare to be playing the same opponent in tests and ODIs in the same conditions. And therefore, we have lots of these tours where it's predominantly just a test tour, just an ODI tour with some T20s tagged on.
The counter to that would be that all the teams want to prepare for the T20 World Cup, which is coming next year, which is supposed to have happened in October this year. But that could be one reason. And with current board, they're all following the itineraries that were already agreed upon previously. So going forward, I think after the T20 World Cup, you'll see a change where the shift will go towards the ODI more and more. And there has to be a balance, though, in my personal opinion.
Although you mentioned the T20 World Cup there, but then there's another T20 World Cup exactly almost a year after that in Australia as well. So they're back-to-back tournaments. So emphasis will be on perhaps T20s.
Yeah, but then again, they have to find that balance. That was I was coming up to, because then the 50 over World Cup will be approaching soon as well.
Yep.
So after this first T20 World Cup, they have to find that balance where they play the ODIs and T20 in a right balance.
But there
is a huge debate on that. I mean, there is huge debate that should T20s be played internationally or just play the World Cup and allow plenty of opportunity and the windows for the leagues, just like they do in football, But I'm glad that I don't have to make these decisions.
Yes, but it appears, it's a fact now that all ODIs that are played will be part of that World Cup Super League series, part of World Cup qualification pathway to India 2023. And because Pakistan and New Zealand, they're due to play each other in the World Cup Super League, but those matches will be played in Pakistan in September. They're planning to have New Zealand over. That's why it's not necessary to play an ODI series in this particular tour.
And also, you have to keep in mind, because of these COVID situations, they want to keep the tours going, but play the more important segments of it at one stage, and not make that, now that the players are off the quarantine and of the bubble in New Zealand and Australia, but in other parts of the world, like in South Africa or even in Pakistan, they still have to be a part of bubble. So they want to keep the tours to a limit where it's manageable for players. Like you already mentioned, that player dropouts have already began. So if they make it too long and fit everything in these times, it may become even difficult. And also the venues as well, because they have limited choices of venues on the tours, especially this year since English summer. So that also will be a contributing factor. So once we get back to normal, I think we'll find a better balance.
Now, you tweeted something about Chris Gayle yesterday, and that he's coming to US, I believe.
Yeah, the biggest T20 tournament, is starting on the 15th in Florida, Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm. I had a point here. I would like to see him in the PSL before he packs up. I would like to see him play in Pakistan.
In Pakistan, I mean, for some reason, PSL has become so competitive. He had a couple of lean seasons, and then he hasn't been looked into.
But he's so destructive.
Yeah,
we saw in the IPL.
There's another thing though with Chris Gayle. He's a big player, and he's a big arena player and a big occasion player. The PSL in UAE, when he start a game on a weekday afternoon in Dubai with 100 people in the stadium, that wouldn't inspire him to do something big. So people like Chris Gayle, they need the atmosphere and the adrenaline, and Pakistani crowds and stadiums, if crowds are allowed in PSL, would give him that. So he would be a wild card. I think any franchise, if he's available at a cut down price or something, I mean, he will be a very good wild card to have still.
Yeah, I'd like to see him. I know he's pulled out of the Lanka Premier League, and he didn't put himself in the. He didn't get picked up in the 100 either in England, but I would like to see him at least play another season of PSL before he packs up. He's 41 now. Time is running out. We want to see him again in the PSL.
Well, as I said, like Pakistani crowds would love him, and he would, seeing the atmosphere that we experienced last year, even players like Chris Gayle at this stage of his career, when he experiences that kind of atmosphere, I think it will spur him on to bigger performances. And it could well be, I mean, who knows, it could well be his swan song. I mean, if he is picked and he enjoys it so much, he might turn up with a couple of match-winning performances, and he would say right there and then that's it for me. It can't get any better for the career that he has. I mean, anything can happen, but I think crowds need to come back for him to be consistently part of these leagues for another couple of years.
I wonder if he's still in West Indies plans for the 2020 World Cup. I saw him in the IPL and he was very impressive. He still had it. I know he'll be 42 by the time the tournament comes along, but he's been the best T20 batsman historically, and still is probably.
I would tend to disagree that he still is, but he was, and in his prime, I mean, and his prime lasted quite a long time. So that means that, I mean, Chris Gayle is a brand in his own self in T20 format. And I was it's very interesting. It's totally off the topic, but I was watching this video the other day on Twitter, and it was showing that how much we ignore that, what a fabulous test record he has. And since the T20 advent, he's become the brand ambassador of that format. But he has a very impressive test record, especially against the bigger teams. And he also has a triple hundred as well. So
a couple of triple hundreds, in fact.
Couple triple hundreds, yeah, you're right. And so Chris Gayle is a brand and coming to an end, right? But like you said, if he's picked in Pakistan Super League, I think it will still be a treat. I'm not sure about his return for the West Indies, but with the two countries that you can expect anything from in cricket, and that's Pakistan and West Indies. That's in terms of how they perform on the ground and how their management react. So nothing can be discounted, but it would be a long shot.
Now, we must touch on the Quaid E Azam Trophy before wrapping up. You worked on the opening round of fixtures. It was Sindh playing Central Punjab in an entertaining match at the National Stadium in Karachi. Since 35 players have gone to New Zealand, has the quality of the competition inevitably gone down with 35? That's a lot of players in what is only 6 teams.
Yeah, the quality, but it has more or less affected all the teams in an even manner, so to speak. So the quality has gone down, but the contest is still very much intense because the teams are evenly balanced even still. And I know that the international stars are not there, so that amount of quality is missing. But the contest is riveting. I mean, the contest is still very even. That makes it very watchable. And because it's only 6 teams, unlike the previous seasons, like a couple of years ago, Pakistan were having like 12, 14, 16 first-class teams. That would really have brought the standard down, but it's not that bad. Even still, it's watchable. And the latest round, the previous round, also produced some very good cricket, and also opportunities for the youngsters to come and perform at a bigger stage with more eyeballs this year on the Quaid E Azam Trophy because of the coverage and the broadcast and all the social media attention. So it's a good test for the youngsters and put their hand up. And it's been quite impressive, to be honest. The standard overall, despite the players going on tour, is really provided some very good cricket and good contest.
A similar thing happened in the English county season because of the bubble and 30 odd players being in a bubble. Lots of counties were missing their players for county cricket, and that gave opportunities to youngsters who are normally in second 11 county teams to play first 11 county cricket. And we saw lots of youngsters prove their worth in county cricket. They wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise, except because of the requirement of team bubbles to have larger squads.
Yeah, and it does happen in every, like you mentioned, England. I have a little bit of experience of knowing the structure over there as well. Every player has a time span as well. And if they don't get opportunity on that right time, sometimes they fade away very quickly without you even realizing. So the players that had the opportunity this year in English summer and now in Pakistani season, probably it's for some of them, the timing could not have been better, to put their hand up and show what they're made of. Because if they hadn't got this opportunity this year, who knows, by next year, they would be interested in something else or because especially professional sport doesn't give you many opportunities. So to get it at the right time is very key element. So for some of those players, I mean, this bubble situation and the new normals couldn't have come at a better time to give them an opportunity in their career, which they will benefit from in years to come.
And we have Sri Lanka touring South Africa. We have India in Australia, and we have Pakistan in New Zealand. So out of these 3 visiting Asian teams, who is most likely to win their test series?
Well, these are traditionally, difficult conditions for Asian teams, all 3 of them in different way. But if you look at it, the strength and depth, we've already given the time, there's a scoreline for India. So still being the strongest team in subcontinent, and we've given them no chance. So we can't go back and say that, no, India has a better chance. But that leaves us with Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and Pakistan's bowling resources, especially with the ability to get 20 wickets on those conditions, put them in a condition where they can upset the home team. It will still be an upset. But if any team can do it, I think Pakistan has the bowling resources to do it, especially. And if the batting pulls up, as we always say, Pakistan could upset the home side.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome, Abdullah.
Thank you. Great talking with you.
Pleasure.